Hey everyone, hope you're having a good afternoon. It's December the 30th, so it's the day before New Year's Eve. We are hustling to get a big project done that we've been working on for the better part of 3 months. Actually, 3 separate projects, 2 at Camp Atterbury in Indiana, just south of Indianapolis, which is where we are today, and then 1 at Fort Pickett, Virginia, which we wrapped up the middle of November. So today is the day when we're actually making our final delivery to Atterbury in Indiana. And as we mentioned in another video, Indianapolis has dozens of these mega warehouses, you know, the size of a small downtown, the size of a small city. And that's one of Amazon's. I think it's the MQJ2. They've got probably at least a half dozen warehouses in the Indianapolis area, because it's basically the most convenient place to ship out of for the Midwest. You can get to about a half a dozen cities with next day ground. Chicago, Louisville, St. Louis, so on and so forth. So that's why Indianapolis is the shipping hub of the Midwest. At least for distribution, for like e-commerce and things like that. But just a quick video to talk about towing with this thing, with the F-150. So today we have, as you can probably see in the mirror there, we got a 12-foot U-Haul. And it is filled to the ceiling. And we've also got a full load in the bed as well. So the bed is completely topped off, and to the point where you can just barely close a tonneau cover, which we always like to do in weather like this because you never know when it's going to start raining. And so the truck is, I mean, if you tow with like a 3500 with a dually, or a 2500 even, it doesn't have a ton of weight on it. But what you start to run into with something like the F-150, which is a light duty pickup, is you start to run into the limitations pretty quickly. Now, Ford likes to claim that these things are capable of towing, you know, properly equipped, capable of towing 10, 12, 13,000 pounds. And I'm here to tell you, we would never tow more than about 8,000 with a light duty pickup, if that. And here's the reason why. Basically what it comes down to is 2 things: stability, and to go along with that, braking. Your engine might have all the power in the world, as this F-150 does with the power boost. It's got 400 plus horsepower, 500 plus pound-feet of torque, and so it can get a big trailer going. But the question you got to ask yourself is, can it stop your big trailer? Notice, by the way, that boost gauge, the truck does not hesitate to get into the boost. The thing that's peculiar, though, is that you never really notice when it's in or out of the boost, because it's so seamless in its operation. You don't feel a surge of power. You don't really hear the turbos spinning up, spooling up. And so it just sort of happens there. You notice it going up and down. It's almost what you might call a throttle position sensor. The deeper you get into the throttle, the more load you put on the engine, the more exhaust starts to flow, the more the turbo starts to spin, the more it starts to compress air going into the engine, so on and so forth. But you don't notice, you don't feel a surge of power. That's what's so peculiar about it. And so again, when you're towing your big 24-foot boat or what have you, or when you're towing a 25, 30-foot camper with a light-duty pickup, yes, it might have all the power in the world, and it might be able to get that thing going, and not be straining, you know, not be revving and bouncing off against the rev limiter and downshifting every time you put your foot down the least little bit. But that's like less than half of the equation. The other major issues are stability and braking. And so with the trailer we have here, it's a 12-foot U-Haul. It's got its own internal brakes. It's like hydraulic surge brakes, whatever you want to call them. But do you really want to trust your life to some U-Haul trailer that's been used and abused for probably at least the last half decade? And maybe that surge braking system works, maybe it doesn't. It doesn't have anti-lock control, that's for sure. And so you get on a wet highway, maybe you're going downhill, and all of a sudden that thing locks up on you. That's not what you want to have happen. Because you realize that you were going downhill a little bit too fast, you got on the brakes a little bit hard, and next thing you know, your trailer brakes have locked up, and now you're in a bad state. And so the other thing, again, which people don't really think about that much until something happens to them, is stability. And to give you an indication of what that looks like, here, let me close the back window. Make it a little bit quieter in here. This truck is extremely quiet. Very, very well refined, especially compared to either our 2003 Dodge 3500 with the Cummins. You can hear that thing a mile away. That thing sets off car alarms practically. Or the dually we have, which is a 2011 Silverado with the Duramax diesel. Those are loud. You know, they got wind noise, they got road noise, obviously engine noise. They don't really attempt to do a ton of noise or NVH type reduction the way a light duty pickup would. Because again, it's almost meant to be a replacement for your family vehicle. So watch what happens when we turn on the adaptive cruise control, which also has lane centering and lane keeping. Okay. So you hit the cruise button, and that is the button that sets the cruise. You don't have to hit a separate one to either arm it or anything like that. Okay, and so it's set for 67. Let's just set it at 65. Now watch what happens. That trailer immediately starts acting up. I don't know if you noticed that. Practically the instant we engaged cruise control with lane centering, the steering wheel started acting up because the truck was trying to make corrections. And again, that trailer immediately started swaying out of the blue. It's loaded absolutely properly and uniformly, was 60% of the weight ahead of the axles, so on and so forth. It's a tandem axle, so it's more stable and lower in profile than a lot of other 12-foot travel trailers. But again, watch what happens. We hit the resume button, the blue halo activates, the truck takes over the steering, and it immediately starts to sway. I mean, you can feel it back there. It's almost what we would call, not necessarily violent swaying, but it's to the point where, no, if we didn't exit out of cruise control, cancel it out, that thing would be getting sideways in a hurry. Let's show you one more time. You hit the resume button, you see the halo, the truck is in control of the steering. And there it goes. There it goes. See the wheel? It's turning the wheel. The trailer is starting to sway really badly back there. And so basically you cannot use lane centering when you got a big trailer back there. Now, in terms of the total weight, the max load on the front axle of this truck, which is the crew cab with the 6.5-foot bed, 4-wheel drive, power boost, the max load on the front axle is 4,000. The max load on the rear axle is 4,150. So separately, they have a combined load carrying capacity of 8,150, but you can't max out both axles The max you can have combined is 7,350. So that's called the GVWR, gross vehicle weight rating of this truck, 7,350. And so we have it loaded right now because we were just on the scales to 3,580 in the front and 3,560 in the back. And so we're within about call it 400 pounds of the max load. 400, 450 of the max load for the front or rear axle. So we have not overloaded either one of them. And for the combined weight on the front and rear axle, we're looking at 7,140. So we're about 200 pounds under the GVWR, which is 7,350. So the truck is loaded practically to its rated or design limitations, but it's by no means overloaded. It's not squatting in the least. It's completely level. And we don't have any kind of a loss of steering control, except for the fact that when the truck tries to drive itself using that lane centering system, which is great when you don't have a trailer on it. When you have a trailer that's reasonably heavy, the trailer axles on this thing are loaded to 5,420. So the trailer's at 5,420. Total is 12,560. You can check my math. And the combined GVWR, or the gross combination weight rating, is something like 14.5. So we're under all of our limitations, either for the we're under the max load on either of the axles or both when they're combined. Again, 4,000 in the front, 4,150 in the rear, that's the max, or a total of 7,350, both axles combined. And the GCWR, the max combination rating, which is the truck and trailer, is I think about 14.5, and we are about 2,000 pounds under that. So we are not overloaded at all, and yet even so, this trailer starts wagging dangerously the instant you turn on that lane centering. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, because Blue Cruise, which is the Ford equivalent, you might say, of Tesla full self-driving, except with a lot more restrictions. But they claim it offers hands-free driving. That's the reason we would never use a hands-free driving system on a pickup. Because when that tail starts to sway like it did, and the truck starts to sway, you got maybe a second, sometimes maybe less than a second, to get control of it before something exceptionally bad happens. And if your hands aren't on the wheel, you know, who knows what you're doing. Maybe you're sending a text, maybe you're doing who knows what. That just slows your reaction time even more. It makes it much more likely you will wind up in the ditch or upside down, or not with us anymore. So word of the wise, again, the lane centering system is great in this truck, but think twice before using it with a trailer, at least a conventional trailer. If you've got a fifth wheel or a gooseneck, that's an entirely different story, and that's why we prefer to use a gooseneck, because it's so much more stable than a bumper pull. It's orders of magnitude more stable than a bumper pull, because the pivot point for that thing, for the front of it, is right over the rear axle of the truck, the drive axle, instead of a couple of feet behind it. And so when the trailer wants to sway, it really can't, because it's got the rear wheels of the truck blocking it from swaying, if that makes any sense. That front pivot point is anchored to the road, you might say. And so, you know, this system, the Ford lane centering system, might work just great with a gooseneck or a fifth wheel. But again, with a conventional trailer loaded to any substantial amount of weight, again, in this case, 5,400 pounds, which to us is nothing. You know, we pulled an 18,000 pound trailer here last week with the dually, and it didn't sway, it didn't act up whatsoever. Conventional trailers, it's a whole nother story. Anyway, just thought we'd show that to you because it was pretty dramatic. And if anybody has similar experiences, or if they think they have figured out how to get it to stop doing that, please let us know. Hey, just a real quick follow-up. We have gone to Atterbury and unloaded, and that trailer is empty. We just reweighed, and there's about 1,000 pounds less on the rear axle, and the trailer is, I want to say, about 3,000 pounds less than it was before. And so watch what happens when we put on the so-called self-driving system, which is adaptive cruise control with lane centering and lane keeping, as they call it. Not a lot of movement in the steering wheel, virtually none. You can still feel it moving a little bit, making some corrections, but if you notice the trailer, it's not moving hardly at all. It's very, very stable. And the steering wheel, you might see some small corrections, very small, but it's not doing the thing that it did an hour ago when we had it fully loaded, where it got into this feedback loop where the steering, which is controlled by the truck right now, would make a correction in one direction, and then the trailer would sort of sway in that direction, and then the truck would make another correction in the opposite direction, and it just kind of started doing that almost immediately when you turned on cruise control with lane centering and lane keeping. And so there's clearly some more calibration that needs to be done on the part of Ford. Small note, check out our MPGs. Going a steady 67, 68 miles an hour. Let's get out from behind this guy. It's not 20 or 21, obviously. The average is in the mid-teens, low to mid-teens. And that's not bad, going in the upper 60s. Something the size and shape of a small house, a tiny house, I guess you can say, hitched up to it. Again, low to mid-teens, at least with something that's the profile of a 12-foot U-Haul, maybe 6.5 feet tall, and about 6.5 feet wide. Not a lot wider than the truck itself, so it's not exactly sticking out on the sides. But no, when a trailer is empty, lane centering works just fine. When the trailer is full, it needs a lot of work in terms of recalibration to keep it from doing that and fishtailing and basically throwing you right off the road, unfortunately. But the fact that it works at all to us is miraculous. We'll see how well the GM Super Cruise works with that new Sierra 1500, which claims that you can use Super Cruise hands-free driving while you've got a trailer hitched up. And I think that thing has a max trailer in the 8,000 pound range. And we'll believe it when we see it. One last thing before we end the video. We don't bother putting it into tow haul mode because to us, tow haul mode doesn't really do anything for you. It changes the shift points a little bit. I think it might lock out 10th gear. It eliminates the stop-start which we don't mind. Stop start in this vehicle is not invasive or intrusive in any way. It's transparent and you just don't even hardly notice it. But and it's not as if you need the extra power or the delayed upshifts that tow haul mode tends to give you. It's just not necessary. Anyway, thanks a lot, everyone. We'll talk to you later. Have a great New Year's Eve.